and welcome back to another video. Obviously we are finished April. Where has the time gone? Honestly, I have no idea. But you know, April's done. Just like poof, just like that. Couple rainy days as usual for April. Randomly some snow. And here we are, it's May. And I'm shocked. I feel too shocked. But here we are, and we're gonna go through all of the books I read in April. And I did read quite a few, not as many as I hoped, I guess, but I read quite a few books and a lot of great ones and a lot of terrible ones. I kind of went through a reading rut in April midway through, and I had to transition. If you saw my previous video, I did a book haul because of this rut, and that really pulled me through and got me out of the end of April. But yes, here we are, end of April, and I read, let me see how many books I read. I have my phone because I have my GoodReads account, and that's kind of how I keep track of my books and order and stuff. So if you want to follow my GoodReads, hit a little follow. I'll put it in my description box. But I read 6 books, nothing crazy, honestly. That's kind of average for me. I think the reading slump really threw me for a loop, and I'll get to what book really put me in that slump so you don't have to read that. But yes, I read 6 books and I want to share them with you and tell you my thoughts. So let's start with book number 1. And I did read a lot on my Kindle. Been getting back into my Kindle. It's really nice to have a way to read library books without having to go to the library when I'm busy all the time. So I'm really loving my Kindle for that reason, and I highly suggest if you want a cheap way to read books, get a Kindle, attach it to your library card, boom, it's awesome. So I'll pop the photo of the books that I read here that were on my Kindle, but the first one I read was Archer's Voice. Yes, I feel like everyone has read this book at this point. If you haven't, you really should. It's a great book, and I gave it 4 stars. So Archer's Voice is about this girl who goes into a small town, and she's trying to kind of escape something that happened to her in her life. And in doing so, she's meeting people in town and is having like kind of this great small town feel that's really bringing her a bit of escapism that she needs. And she meets this guy who's a bit quiet, reserved, and everyone in the small town kind of looks at him as a bit of strange. So she kind of is curious, well, what is this guy's past? Who is he? I want to understand him more. And we follow that kind of journey of her like really meeting him and then connecting with him and his story. And it's really, really beautifully done and written, and I just love it. Also, there is a part in the book where the 2 characters kind of have to go their separate ways to like grow, and I really appreciate that, because I feel like sometimes when like 2 characters in a book are kind of broken, authors typically like to have it so that when the 2 characters meet, they like solve each other's problems, like their love is the solution. And I really like Archer's Voice because while their love is providing them like with a lot of value in their life, they also understand that they need to solve their problems on their own. So they kind of break off for a little bit to like figure out their own solutions and then come back together. And I really appreciate that the author put that part in, because sometimes it can kind of feel like the story is left short when it's like these 2 broken people met up together, fell in love, and now everything is solved. Like, it's not how life works. So I feel like Archer's Voice is a really great way to like capture how love can be such a solution, but also not the full solution, and just the growth of 2 individuals. So Archer's Voice is great. There were parts of the book that kind of bothered me. Like, I don't really love when the male character is timid and scared, and like I like, you know, I don't mind when like the timidness is there. I understand why Archer had like a timidness to him based on his story, but also like at some point, like, you know, at some point just like kick it in in, like give me a high gear or something. Give him a little bit of a like oomph at some point. And it was a bit frustrating at times at that because of that. But that's just because I like a good main character. I like when all the characters are strong. So it bothered me a little bit at points when they were acting weak and couldn't kind of, you know, but it makes sense. The book, the struggles, it makes sense. It's not my preferred. The next book I read is one of my favorites from this year so far. I gave it 5 stars and I cannot speak about it enough. I loved it, I loved it, I loved it, I loved it. And that was Before We Were Strangers by Renee Carlino. Hopefully I'm saying that right. But Before We Were Strangers, and I loved it. Can I say that again? I loved it. I just loved it. Basically, how do I describe this book? Basically these two individuals meet in university in the dorms, and the main character guy ends up having this like huge photography business that he goes and pursues, and then the girl is in like musical and she stays in New York to pursue her music. And like once they finish university and kind of go on their individual ways, they kind of part, but they also want to be together. So it's that like miscommunication kind of trope where like they both really love each other, but like the communication wasn't there or it was missed in parts, and they end up having their own individual lives even though they wanted their lives to be together. And then they're reunited kind of later in life and realize that they've missed out on all this time that they could have been together, that they didn't realize and understand each other. But the reason I really loved this novel is because I really enjoy, one, like instant love, because I just love that trope, and then two, when two individuals kind of go and pursue their own like dreams and are able to like find their own individual voices but still come together. Something about those two tropes like mixed together I really enjoy, and this book was like that perfectly, like perfectly two individuals finding their own like dreams come true, but also being able to eventually come back together and like reignite their like instant love. I don't know, it's so good. And obviously sometimes miscommunication tropes can be really annoying, like when you know that they both like each other but something's just kind of astray and you're like, can you just solve it already? Like somebody tell the other person what you actually think and then this whole thing wouldn't have happened. But the way it's done doesn't feel that way. Like you totally understand how the characters are falling down this path, and the author doesn't make it obvious. Like you don't actually know there's a miscommunication until after the fact. Really jam-packed with a lot of beautiful quotes and beautiful moments, and I highly recommend if you like either of those tropes, instant love or I don't even know what you would call it, like break apart, come back together. Great, I love it. And it was really fascinating to also hear two characters that had very individual lives and were able to kind of help each other through those problems. So highly recommend. Before We Were Strangers is one of my top reads this year. Then here is where the slump really came in. Really, the slump just hit me like a brick. I was doing so well with the first 2 books, and then I hit these next 2 books and I just couldn't understand what was happening. The first one I read was Bunny, and this is a well talked about book. I feel like a lot of people have talked about it and they've recommended it, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna give this a go. It kind of sounds a bit strange, kind of sounds a bit twisted from what I've heard. Sounds like kind of my thing. Like I like a little bit of twist, I like a bit of like weirdness. Like sure, let's give it a shot. It was really weird. Really weird. I had no idea what was going on. And some of the language in it was just like odd. Like I felt like I was reading someone's dark journal where they just hated on everything in life, and it was pretty interesting at first. Like it kind of gave me like Mean Girl vibes, like the movie Mean Girls, but from like a more realistic point of view of like, I hate these girls, like they're annoying. This is how it actually looks from an outside perspective of someone who's not in the circle. Like it was interesting in that sense, But then it just kept getting weirder and weirder, and the click and how it worked, I don't know. I was like, what does this all mean? I feel like there was like a meaning behind it that resonates with some people, but I couldn't understand it. I just felt like I was reading something that, like, it was kind of like reading or watching an Oscar movie. Like, you understand why it's gotten so many great reviews, and you understand why it's like best in picture, but you also don't understand why it's popular. Does that make any sense? Like, you're like, I understand the beauty of this, but I wouldn't recommend it. And that's how I felt. I gave this a 2 stars. I don't understand what the underlying story was that it was supposed to be there. I still can't grapple with what the ending was, but honestly, I'm still thinking about this book. So maybe it did put a little bit more of an impact on me than I think it did. So for that reason, it's a 2 star instead of a 1. And that's all I can say about that. The next book I read but didn't read because I DNF'd it, and this is the one that really put me in a slump, really put me in a slump, was The Club. So I thought this was gonna be a great book. I mean, a thriller where everyone's in the same hotel-ish area and someone dies, and now they're all trying to figure out why that person died or who was the person that killed them. It's a lovely trope. I love reading about it. It gives you on your feet. It keeps you on your feet. You're really like thrilled with it. You're really trying to figure out the mystery with everyone. And some characters you're like, oh, they're a bit weird. Maybe it's them. But then later on you find it's like sometimes the sweet ones. You just kind of go back and forth between who you think it is the entire book, and I love that. But the build up in this book was so long. Like, I was halfway through and there still wasn't anything that happened. Like, the character that's supposed to die still didn't die halfway through the book. I was like, when's the juice coming here? And the characters weren't even that interesting, so I was kind of bored with even just reading the like build up of the characters. And there was too many characters. I was like, ugh, like, enough already. We don't need 20 people in this book. I wanted 5 people or 8 max that are kind of having their own lives, and I'm trying to figure out which one's the murderer, but I don't want to read about like 20 people for half the book and still not get to the juice, you know? So I DNF'd it halfway through. I was like, I can't read about these pop culture problems anymore of the main characters being at this high-end hotel in the middle of an island. I can't read about it anymore unless someone dies and the plot changes. But that's how I felt. So I don't recommend unless you really want to sit through character building, and if character building is a thing for you, then maybe you'll like it. Pop culture characters, maybe it's for you. But for me, I need something to happen in a book. Characters being the main plot is not my thing. After that, I was like, you know what, the only person that can get me out of this slump is little Colleen Hoover, because her books are so fast-paced. So I read Layla by Colleen Hoover, and I gave this one a 3 stars. So it is not my highly rated by Colleen Hoover by any means, but it was still good. Very strange. Like, there's a ghost in it. Like, what? If you're really into like ghost coming in love. Richard, you want to come in? Say hi to Richard. This is my doggo. And he loves when I read because it means you get to cuddle him while I read. You love it. Yes. Anyways, you want to sit here while I do this one book? Then you can leave? Okay. So like I was saying, Layla, if you're into like ghost romance, it sounds so strange. But you know, a lot of people are into it. Ghost romances, there you go, that's what it is. It's a ghost romance. There is a ghost, it's kind of paranormal, very fast paced, and there's a lot of twists and turns, but it's very strange at the same time. And I was into it, but also kind of got bored of it because I knew it was gonna happen. It wasn't that interesting, like there wasn't a lot of twists and turns like Colleen Hoover usually has. It was very predictable to me, and the ghost part just kind of threw me off. Like when he was essentially falling in love with the ghost, I was like, ugh, can't really connect with this. Like I've never really had a fantasy about being with the ghost. No, not for me. So that's how I felt about that. All right, next book I read was My Body by Emily Ratajkowski. That's how you say it, I think. I think we all know who she is. You know, if you've watched Blurred Lines, the music video, or kind of seen her on any of her modeling stuff, you'll recognize that name and this cover, because I feel like it's everywhere because it's so aesthetically, pleasingly, just nothingness but something at the same time. I don't know, I love this cover, and I feel like a lot of people do because it's like all over book Instagram. But I loved this book. I gave it a 4 stars. It was close to a 5 stars for me, but obviously it's kind of a one topic note, and I feel weird giving stars to memoirs. Maybe I shouldn't, because it's like someone's life. Like, why am I giving it stars? But sometimes I am fascinated by the way that they write their lives, that I feel like that kind of is what I'm giving stars to. And it was very relatable, but not relatable. I love the way she like dictates and explains how she feels about her own body and her image, and the way that other people have inflicted on the way that she feels about her body. I think a lot of females can relate to this, in that others can really inflict the way you see yourself, and you start to kind of disassociate with your own body because it's almost feels like it's not yours at some point when there's so many opinions about it. And especially in the modeling industry, I mean, I not at all did a lot, but a little of modeling and acting when I was younger. And when other people are giving their opinions on your body or on the way you use your body for acting or things like that, it kind of, you start to disassociate yourself with it. It just feels like an object to you instead of a part of you. And she talks a lot about that, about how she didn't feel connected to her body in the sense, and when other people had control of it, it would bother her. And even just the act of like self-care, it's very fascinating to hear her perspective, and I think a lot of people can relate to it. And I think it's an important topic to talk about, and the fact that this is how we treat people in that industry, and it's kind of horrific and gross, and needs to be talked about more. So I highly recommend this book, but I do want to put a trigger warning on it, because I feel like if you are going through any sort of like eating disorder, body dysmorphia, you definitely will relate to this book, but maybe it's not for you at this stage. Now, moving on to my last book of April. It was After I Do. Oh, it's kind of a rainy day, so I don't know if you can even see this. Here we go. It was After I Do by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and we always love a good Taylor Jenkins Reid book. I gave this book a 3 stars. It's cute, okay? It's cute. It's a cute little like romance book, but it's nothing special, and I wouldn't hone in on it, and I wouldn't really recommend it to anyone. It was a great read for this time, but I just don't love it. Essentially, it is this girl, Lauren and Ryan, have been married, and they've known each other since they were little, and have been married since they graduated university. And then they've been in this relationship for, I think it was like 5 to 8 years, something like that. And they start to have a lot of arguments within the relationship, and more often than not, they are arguing than they are liking each other. And so they essentially resent each other. They don't like each other anymore, and they need a break. So they have a year-long break from each other where they just don't talk, they don't see each other. They're essentially broken up, essentially divorced, but not actually being divorced, because their idea is that by the end of the year they can come back together and actually be in love with each other. So in this year they can kind of grow as individuals, or you know, do anything that they feel they want to, because they can now that they're not tied to each other. And then there's also a lot of family dynamics. I think Taylor Jenkins Reid is amazing at having family dynamics. So that sibling to sibling relationship, mom to daughter relationship, even there's a grandma to daughter relationship, and there's great dynamics within those that really show self-growth within the main character, Lauren. But other than that, it's kind of predictable, and it's cute, but like cheesy. It's a 3 stars. It's aight. It's aight. The family moments were cute to me. The relationship moments were like meh, meh. So that was my books for April. Richard, hey, give him a little pat. Yes. Those were the books for April. I'm so glad you guys could stick through this video with me to find out all the books I read for April, and I will see you guys for May, and I hope I read a lot of great books in May and there's no DNFs. But me and Richard are gonna go now because it's a rainy day. It's a perfect day for some more reading, so I'm gonna get to editing this video, go read some books, and call it a good Sunday. So see you guys next time for my next video. Bye. Richard, say bye. Richard, say bye. Look. Bye. Bye, everyone. Bye.